The night sky over the outskirts of Tehran was no longer a silent black, but was instead illuminated by glowing orange plumes of fire, signaling a permanent shift in the flow of Middle Eastern history. While the world remained in shock from chaotic reports, a brutal truth was confirmed. The heart of power in the Islamic Republic of Iran had been struck a fatal blow. In less than 50 seconds, a precise strike using bunker-busting bombs wiped out the top-secret command complex where the highest-ranking generals had gathered. Initial reports from Israeli and United States intelligence sources confirmed that Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had perished. Photographic evidence of the Supreme Leader's body began to circulate, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter filled with blood and fire. President Donald Trump, in a defiant statement from the White House, called on the Iranian people to seize this moment to topple the regime, asserting that the hour of freedom had arrived. However, behind the heroic rhetoric of democracy and swift military victories, a larger shadow was watching from afar with a calculated smile. That shadow was Beijing. While United States cruise missiles were costing millions of dollars per launch, and aircraft carriers were consuming billions of dollars to maintain a presence in the Gulf, China was playing a much longer and more expensive game. The title of this trap was simple yet deadly: $100 billion. This was not just a figure on paper from trade agreements, but a lifeblood pumped directly into the veins of Iran to ensure the nation never truly collapsed, but also never stopped fighting. China's strategy was clear: turn Iran into an open wound that would never heal on the body of United States geopolitics. Every time Washington thought they had subdued Tehran through economic sanctions or devastating airstrikes, Beijing appeared as a silent financial savior. By committing to invest hundreds of billions of dollars into Iran's energy and telecommunications infrastructure, China was not only buying cheap oil to feed its industrial machine, but also purchasing an effective tool to pin down the United States military in the Middle East forever. This $100 billion trap was designed to make the United States bleed until exhausted. Look at what was happening on the ground. While the United States focused on bombing hardened bunkers and eliminating leaders, China focused on building pipelines and digital networks that Washington could not destroy without facing a direct confrontation with Beijing. This was an asymmetric war of strategic thinking. On one side was the United States trying to solve problems with direct military power and instant regime change, while on the other side was China using economics as a lever to prolong the conflict, forcing the United States to pour more resources into a battlefield with no end. The death of the Supreme Leader might be a symbolic victory for Donald Trump, but for Beijing, it was merely a new variable in the grand plan to weaken the superpower status of the United States. As Iran fell into chaos, the need for support from China would only increase, and the $100 billion trap would tighten further, turning Iran into a strategic outpost for China in the very heart of the land the United States always sought to control. To understand the magnitude of this geopolitical chess move, one must look past the smoke of the recent explosions in Tehran and into the quiet clinical boardrooms of Beijing. For years, while the United States was busy deploying massive carrier strike groups and debating the merits of tactical strikes, China was quietly signing a 25-year cooperation agreement that would redefine the power balance of the 21st century. This was not just a trade deal. It was a strategic lifeline that transformed Iran into a permanent fortress of resistance against Western hegemony. The core of this strategy lies in the commitment of $400 billion over 2.5 decades, with the initial $100 billion serving as the ultimate trap for Washington. As American officials calculated the cost of their precision missiles, Beijing was calculating the cost of American exhaustion. They realized that they did not need to fight the United States directly. Instead, they could simply provide the financial and technological scaffolding for a regime that would do the fighting for them. This $100 billion infusion acted as a strategic buffer against Western pressure. When the Trump administration reimposed maximum pressure sanctions, China became the primary buyer of Iranian crude oil, often through complex and shadowy networks that bypass the international banking system. This illegal oil trade did not just keep the lights on in Tehran. It funded the very ballistic missiles and drone programs that were now raining down on American allies. By purchasing oil at a massive discount, China achieved a double victory. They secured the energy necessary for their industrial expansion while simultaneously ensuring that Iran remained a constant, well-armed thorn in the side of the United States. This is the essence of the bleeding strategy. Every dollar the United States spends on defending the Persian Gulf is a dollar not spent on competing with China in the Pacific or investing in domestic innovation. Beijing is essentially outsourcing the containment of the United States to a revolutionary regime that has nothing to lose. The genius of the Chinese trap lies in its invisibility to the average voter. While the American public sees news reports of burning cities and dead leaders, they rarely see the digital infrastructure and telecommunications systems being installed by Chinese firms across the Iranian plateau. These investments create a dependency that goes beyond simple economics. They integrate Iran into a Chinese-led technological ecosystem, making it nearly impossible for a future pro-Western government to untangle itself from Beijing's grip, even if the current regime falls, as President Trump hopes. The new leadership will find itself inheriting a nation whose ports, railways, and internet are owned or controlled by Chinese interests. This is why the $100 billion is a trap. It is designed to survive the very people it was intended to support. As the smoke clears from the latest strikes, the reality of this exhaustion begins to set in. The United States is currently forced to maintain a massive military footprint across multiple continents, stretching its resources to the breaking point. Meanwhile, China remains relatively insulated, watching as its greatest rival burns through its treasury and its military readiness in a theater that offers no clear path to final victory. The $100 billion trap is not about winning a war in a single day or 50 seconds. It is about ensuring that the United States is still fighting that same war 50 years from now, while the rest of the world moves on under a new global order centered in the East. This is the silent war that is truly being fought in the shadows of the Middle East. And so far, the United States is falling exactly where Beijing wants it to. The 50-second strike in Tehran was a masterpiece of military precision. But in the realm of grand strategy, precision is often a secondary concern compared to endurance. While the United States celebrates the tactical success of penetrating a hardened bunker, the true architect of the region's future is watching the cost-to-benefit ratio shift in its favor. China's $100 billion investment is not merely about balancing books or securing energy. It is about providing the technical and industrial DNA for Iran's asymmetric arsenal. For every sophisticated bunker buster dropped by an American F-35, the Iranian military, backed by Chinese components and engineering, is mass-producing low-cost solutions designed to overwhelm and exhaust. This is where the bleeding becomes literal. We are seeing a world where the most advanced military in history is forced to use $2 million interceptor missiles to shoot down $20,000 drones. This math is unsustainable, and Beijing knows it. The silent partnership between Beijing and Tehran has turned Iran into a high-tech laboratory for testing ways to counter American power without China ever having to fire a single shot. Much of the technology found in Iranian-shaped drones and ballistic missiles can be traced back to Chinese designs or supply chains that remain untouched by Western sanctions. By providing the microchips, the guidance systems, and the satellite navigation support, China ensures that Iran can maintain a persistent threat level that requires a massive permanent American military presence. This is the heart of the exhaustion strategy. As long as Iran can threaten the Strait of Hormuz or launch waves of drones at American bases, the United States cannot pivot to the Pacific. Washington is effectively tied to a post in the Middle East, forced to spend its treasure and its focus on a conflict that China is subsidizing to stay at a slow boil. Beyond the hardware, there is the digital dimension of this $100 billion trap. Chinese firms have been instrumental in building Iran's domestic internet and surveillance apparatus. This serves two purposes. First, it allows the regime to suppress internal dissent more effectively, ensuring that the chaos following the death of the supreme leader does not immediately lead to a pro-Western revolution. Second, it integrates Iranian intelligence into a broader network of data sharing with Beijing. The United States is not just fighting a rogue state, it is fighting a rogue state that has been granted the eyes and ears of a global technological superpower. Every move the American military makes in the region is being analyzed, recorded, and studied by Chinese observers. Iran has become a proxy sensor for Beijing. It's providing real-world data on how American weapons and tactics perform under pressure. This relationship creates a feedback loop of attrition that targets the very foundation of American global leadership. While the United States military is focused on the immediate threat of Iranian retaliation for the strike on Tehran, the economic planners in Beijing are looking at the long-term erosion of the U.S. dollar's dominance. By trading with Iran in yuan and creating alternative financial channels, China is slowly chipping away at the power of American sanctions. When the $100 billion flows into Iran, it does so through a system that Washington cannot see or control. This makes the maximum pressure campaign a hollow shell. If the United States cannot bankrupt the regime because China keeps the credit lines open, then military force becomes the only remaining tool. And as history has shown in Afghanistan and Iraq, military force is the most expensive and least stable way to maintain influence. The trap is now fully set. The United States is being baited into a multi-decade occupation or a massive regional war, both of which serve China's ultimate goal of American decline. The aftermath of the 52nd strike in Tehran has revealed a landscape of fractured power, yet beneath the rubble, a more resilient structure remains intact. This structure is not made of concrete and steel, but of debt and strategic dependency. The $100 billion trap, meticulously laid by Beijing, is now entering its most critical phase. As the United States military assesses the tactical damage to Iran command and control, the economic planners in China are already moving to secure the pieces. This is the new reality of the Middle East, a region where the traditional tools of American power, such as aircraft carriers and precision strikes, are being rendered obsolete by the steady and quiet flow of capital. The death of the supreme leader was intended to be a knockout blow, but instead has served as a catalyst for Iran total absorption into the Chinese orbit. China's $100 billion commitment is a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. While Washington spends millions on a single missile to destroy a bunker, Beijing spends millions to build the very infrastructure that makes that bunker redundant. This is the core of the exhaustion strategy. By investing in Iran oil fields, refineries, and pipelines, China ensures that the Iranian state remains economically viable even under the most extreme American pressure. This economic lifeline allows the Iranian military to continue its provocations, forcing the United States to keep its forces deployed and its treasury open. The United States is effectively fighting an enemy that is being subsidized by its own largest economic rival. Every gallon of discounted oil that flows to China is a gallon that fuels the very machine designed to eventually displace American global leadership. The psychological aspect of this trap is equally devastating. By providing a constant stream of investment, China offers the Iranian regime a sense of permanence that the United States cannot match with mere threats of regime change. This creates a powerful incentive for the Iranian people and their new leaders to look east rather than west. When the smoke clears and the bombs stop falling, the Iranian citizens see Chinese engineers and Chinese workers rebuilding their cities and their internet. This contrast is a powerful weapon in the war of narratives. The United States is seen as the power that brings destruction and chaos, while China is seen as the power that brings stability and progress. This perception is worth far more than the $100 billion spent to create it. It is the foundation of a new world order where the United States is increasingly isolated and irrelevant. The genius of the $100 billion trap is its ability to turn every American success into a Chinese opportunity. If the United States kills a top general, China offers to train the successor. If the United States bombs a port, China offers to rebuild it as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. This dynamic ensures that the United States is never truly finished with Iran. The bleeding continues because the wound is being kept open by a surgeon who is profiting from the patient's slow decline. As we move further into this conflict, the question is no longer whether the United States can win on the battlefield, but whether it can afford to stay on it. The $100 billion is a trap because it ensures that the cost of leaving is high. But the cost of staying is infinite. Washington is caught in a loop of its own making. While Beijing quietly prepares for the day when the last American soldier finally goes home, the conflict initiated by the 52nd strike does not remain confined to the borders of Iran. It ripples outward, touching every corner of the Middle East where Iranian influence has taken root over decades. This is the second layer of the $100 billion trap. Beijing is not just funding a nation. It is funding a regional network of resistance that ensures the United States can never truly declare victory. As the American military celebrates the elimination of the supreme leader, the proxy forces in Lebanon, Yemen, and Gaza are receiving renewed instructions and, more importantly, renewed resources. This infusion of Chinese-backed capital ensures that even without a central head in Tehran, the body of the resistance continues to move, striking at American interests and allies with renewed ferocity and precision. We must look at the math of this exhaustion. Historical data suggests that during previous conflicts in the region, 75 or even 80% of American casualties were caused by Iranian-designed explosive devices and tactical coordination. These weapons are cheap, effective, and now, thanks to Chinese industrial support and the $100 billion credit line, they're being produced on a scale that is impossible to stop. This is the reunion tour of conflict that critics of the invasion feared. While voices in Washington like Senator Lindsey Graham call for a mass murder campaign to blow the hell out of the enemy, they are providing the perfect propaganda for Beijing. China uses these aggressive American statements to portray the United States as a declining, bloodthirsty empire to the global South, while positioning itself as the steady hand of reconstruction, trade, and regional stability. The humanitarian toll of this bleeding strategy is immense. As reports emerge of strikes hitting civilian areas and schools, the narrative shift becomes undeniable. China does not need to win the military war. They only need to wait for the United States to lose the moral one. By keeping the Iranian state functioning through $100 billion in trade and investment, Beijing ensures that the United States must choose between an endless, brutal occupation or a humiliating withdrawal. Both options lead to the same result: the depletion of American morale, wealth, and international standing. This is not a war of weeks or months, as some in the White House might believe. It is a war of decades, designed to endure long after the current administration has left office. Every day the United States stays in the region, it spends billions of dollars that could have been used to modernize its own domestic infrastructure or compete in the high-tech industries of the future. Meanwhile, China continues to build its global empire, using the Middle East as a giant magnet that pulls American attention and resources away from the Pacific. The $100 billion is a small price for Beijing to pay to effectively sideline their greatest competitor. As the ghost cities of the region fill with the sound of sirens and the smoke of constant skirmishes, the trap continues to tighten. The United States is caught in a cycle of reacting to a ghost, while the true architect of the conflict remains safely out of reach, watching the clock run out on American hegemony. The echoes of the 52nd strike will resonate through the halls of history, long after the smoke has cleared from the ruins of Tehran. While military historians will study the precision of the bunker buster bombs and the intelligence coup that led to the demise of the supreme leader, The real lesson lies in the silence that followed. This silence belongs to Beijing, the architect of a strategy that has successfully turned a regional conflict into a global drain on American power. The $100 billion trap is not a static piece of architecture. It is a living, breathing mechanism of attrition. As the United States prepares for what Senator Lindsey Graham describes as a mass murder campaign to settle the score once and for all, it is playing directly into the hands of those who wish to see the American century come to a grinding halt. By reacting with overwhelming force and entering a reunion tour of past military interventions, Washington is fulfilling the exact prophecy that China has banked on for decades. The reality on the ground in the Middle East is now one of ghost cities and shuttered embassies. From Tel Aviv to Riyadh, the stability that the United States promised to provide has evaporated, replaced by a permanent state of high alert and economic paralysis. This is the ultimate goal of the $100 billion infusion. It was never about saving the Iranian regime for the sake of ideology. It was about ensuring that the cost of American intervention remains prohibitively high. While the United States military is stretched thin, protecting shipping lanes and countering drone swarms in the Persian Gulf, China is free to expand its influence in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. The American taxpayer is footing the bill for a war that has no exit strategy, while the Chinese economy reaps the benefits of cheap energy and a distracted rival. This is how empires fall, not through a single catastrophic defeat, but through 1,000 small cuts and a series of expensive, avoidable traps. As we look toward the next 2 weeks and beyond, the cycle of violence shows no signs of slowing down. The closure of United States missions in Riyadh and Kuwait, and the urgent calls for nationals to leave the region are clear indicators that the situation is spiraling out of control. Yet, every missile fired and every carrier deployed only deepens the dependency of the remaining Iranian infrastructure on Chinese support. The $100 billion trap is now a self-sustaining engine of decline. Even if the current Iranian government is completely dismantled, the shadow of Beijing will loom over the reconstruction, ensuring that whatever emerges remains beholden to the East. The United States entered this conflict with the hope of bringing democracy and liberation to Tehran. But it has instead found itself trapped in a geopolitical quagmire that was paid for and prepared by its greatest competitor. In the final analysis, the 50-second strike was a tactical masterpiece, but a strategic disaster. It provided the spark for a conflagration that the United States cannot extinguish without burning through its own future. The trap is closed, the bleeding is constant, and the cost is rising by the hour. China has proved that in the 21st century, the most effective weapon is not a bomb that can penetrate 60 feet of reinforced concrete, but a checkbook that can finance an endless war. As the world watches the Middle East burn, the message from Beijing is clear. The era of uncontested American dominance is over, and the $100 billion trap was the final nail in the coffin. The United States may have won the battle for the bunker, but it is losing the war for the future.